Spectre is haunting the world, the specter of free information. Where are the advocates of freedom in the new digital society who have not been stigmatized as pirates, anarchists, communists? Have we not seen that most of those hurling the epithets were merely thieves in power, whose talk of intellectual property was merely a justification for retaining unjustifiable privileges in a world irrevocably changing? But all the powers of globalism acknowledge that the movement for free information is itself a power. And it is high time that we should meet the nursery tale of the specter of free information with a manifesto of our own. I didn't actually come here to give that speech this morning. Do that another time. But I am very grateful to Larry for pointing out that there are certain contradictions inherent in capitalism, and for suggesting that Lord and Master, freeman and slave, master and journeyman, they have all conducted their fight, oppressor and oppressed, sometimes covertly, sometimes overtly, often leading to revolution and the downfall of social systems. In other words, I'm here this morning to remind you that you can't just make some compromises. You've got to keep the real end in view. The real end is freedom. Now, what Larry has to say this morning is, I must say, uncharacteristically optimistic. I didn't hear him say that we were going to fail. I didn't hear him say that freedom was doomed. I heard him say there was going to be a civil war, which was good news. I heard him say it was going to be a civil war, which is even better news. I wish the guys on the other side thought that as firmly as he does. Now, I'm planning to fight clean, but I'm not planning to give up. It's nice that victory has been announced for the part of this little game that I've been playing. I don't think it is actually victory yet, you understand. I think the real war's just about to start. But we had a lot of practice thinking about how we were going to fight it in all the years when they weren't even noticing yet how dangerous we were. And I think we're ready, minus the few $1 billion that they're going to spend on the other side. I think Larry is right to notice that the contradictions are catching the Allies up already. It's one of those cases where even before you begin bombing the children, the coalition is falling apart. And that's good news. And I'm very much in favor of it. Some Powell or other is messing up the war. I do think also that it is important to note that that division among layers, as Brian says, is merely conventional. And you can move that line around a lot, both ways. If you keep the code free, you can do things with it that affect the physical layer of the net, that affect the content layer of the net, that affect the meaning of the net. And Yochai is right in pointing out just how easy that is to do, how little you need. I think the big news is that the incentives argument is already dying. Even before they get ready to fight that enormously expensive war against us to protect that argument, it is dying. People are not believing in it anymore. Creation, my friends, is Brownian motion. It does not matter why, it does not matter when, it does not matter how, and it does not matter in which direction. It just happens. The trick is to keep it from unhappening in some orderly, systematic way for the benefit of a few. Resist the resistance, I said once. I still mean it. Everything's going to flow in the wires. Just don't let them notch up the resistance at the ends. So Larry's right. It's at the ends that it happens. We're going to have to take at least a piece of it out of the pipes. We're going to have to put it in the air. We are going to have to generate a network that nobody owns. And in order to do that, we are going to have to rely in substantial measure on carriers that nobody owns either. We are going to have to build a layer of communication which consists of all of us routing one another's traffic completely without any place where anybody bottlenecks anything. In that network, John Gilmore, my old friend, is right that censorship is failure and gets routed around, but so is property failure that gets routed around. So is control failure that gets routed around. I'm not suggesting that we can just betake ourselves to the air and fly away from all this mess. The wires underneath are really important too, but we will not get that piece of the story straight unless we liberate enough bandwidth that has no carriers to make equality. The great moral question of the 21st century is this. If all culture, all information, all art, all music, all useful knowledge has zero marginal cost and can be given to everybody everywhere at the same price that it can be made in the first place, why is it ever moral to exclude anyone from anything? If you could manufacture enough food to feed the world by simply pressing a button as many times as you needed lamb chops, there would be no moral case in any system of moral thinking of which I am aware for allowing anyone ever to starve. And we have to make sure that as we deal with all the complexities in each of the little corners of this world where we are, each of the little quantum effects of this and that propinquity to this or that previously large gravitational force, that we don't forget that the moral question is before our eyes the whole time. In the world towards which we are moving, all of the traditional relations that support ignorance are radically unjust, and we have an obligation to fight against them. But that's okay. It's fun, believe me. It won't hurt. I've been having a good time. What I think we need to understand then, and I believe that Yochai has suggested how we might begin understanding it, is that even in a culture where people are accustomed to go home at night and sit on the couch, it is possible to make a revolution. A few minutes at a time, sometimes, not always, but certainly without coercion. Because underneath, and this was pointed out yesterday in the discussion about the difference between how economists and lawyers think about property, underneath this is the fact that lawyers, when they think about property, think about exclusion. They think about coercion. They think about forcing arrangements. That's what property is from the lawyer's point of view, for. You can't have this unless you give me that first. What we are moving towards in general is non-coercive arrangements for making and distributing things. And here I need to pick up a stitch of Yochai's just for a moment. He's absolutely right that when you want to assess whether peers can do things, you want to look at the modularity and granularity of what it is you want them to do. But he focuses only on the word production. Distribution is modular and very granular. And all distribution of lightweight, zero marginal cost goods can be done by peers. Indeed, as I have otherwise argued in my usual unsystematic and completely non-formal way, distribution by peers achieves maximum theoretical efficiency, what I have called the 6 degrees of separation principle. Here, give it to anybody you think ought to have it. It propagates at the closest possible, shortest possible paths through the social net and arrives everywhere in the least time. Remember that most of these property theorists, these exclusionists on the other side, are distributors. They don't make anything. They say they make something, but the work-for-hire principle is all that allows them to maintain that claim. They distribute stuff they say is theirs. You remember Mr. Sherman's difficulty on this point. Not because they actually thought it up, but because they paid money to people who thought it up. They are actually simply buying and selling the right to distribute, and they have no business to exist. They have no business to exist. So we have to do something to take their existence away from them. Fortunately, it's not complicated. We just have to ignore them. Then they will make trouble. Then they will attempt to coerce people. Then they will put 15-year-olds in jail. Then they will arrest Russians in America. Then they will do various egregious things. Then we will fight. Then they will beat us. Then we will win. Because of course, the more they disintermediate, the more there's only them and us. Oh, do you remember capitalism, the bourgeois? They made everything much simpler. The class structure got narrower. It came down only to those two exclusive groups, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Everything got simpler. Those old social structures, they collapsed. Everything solid melts into air, you will recall. So in the end, it's just them and us. They're people, we're people, eyeball to eyeball. They've got a laptop, we've got a laptop. Doesn't look good for them, does it? As long as I've got a laptop, they're in trouble. They've got to take it away from me. They've got to put something inside it that says it's not mine anymore. And you just give me a neural interface, and they got to get even closer inside. And the world's not going to let them do that. Because for that, people will fight. Larry says free labor. Free soil, you recall, went along with that, so I say free bandwidth. Free men went along with that. I say free minds. Don't give up until we're free. Don't give up because you have a compromise that's okay now. We can ride a little closer to the front of the bus than we used to. Freedom. Freedom. Now. Thank you.